The gun pressed against my back 3 nights ago, and now I am holding a mop instead of a weapon, and my hands will not stop shaking. I keep my eyes down as I push the cart through the marble lobby of Voss Tower, 42 floors of glass and steel that used to mean nothing to me, and now means everything. The uniform is gray and stiff and smells like bleach. My name tag says Danny Marsh. Nobody looks at a janitor twice, and that is exactly why I am here. 6 weeks ago, I was Dante Marchetti, and men either respected that name or feared it, and there was no third option. I ran a family that controlled half the docks and most of the warehouses on the east side of the city. I made decisions that moved millions of dollars, and I never once had to ask permission from anyone. Then Nathaniel Cross decided he wanted what I had, and he did not care how many bodies it took to get it. My own cousins sold me out for a number I do not even want to remember. 3 of my closest men are dead. My apartment burned to the ground with everything I owned inside it. The only reason I am still breathing is because I disappeared before Cross finished what he started, and the only reason nobody has found me yet is because nobody in their right mind would ever look for Dante Marchetti pushing a cleaning cart through an office building at midnight. I tell myself this is temporary, a place to breathe, a place to think. 3 months, maybe 4, until I know who is still loyal and who sold me to Cross for a payday. Until then, I am nobody. I am Danny, from the cleaning company, quiet and forgettable, the kind of man whose face people forget the moment he leaves the room. The night shift supervisor is a heavy-set man named Carl, who talks too much and asks too few questions, which suits me fine. He hands me a list of floors and tells me to start at the top and work my way down, emptying trash cans and vacuuming carpets and wiping down glass doors until every trace of the day is gone. I nod and take the list, and do not tell him that 4 hours ago, I watched a man die in an alley 2 blocks from here, and that the only reason I am not the one lying in that alley is because I ran faster than he did. The elevator takes me to the 40th floor, and the doors slide open onto a hallway so quiet I can hear my own heartbeat. This is the executive level, the floor where the real decisions get made, the floor where the woman who owns this entire building keeps her office. I have heard her name mentioned twice already tonight, once by Carl, and once by a security guard who called her the coldest woman in the city and said it like a compliment. Elena Voss. I do not know much about her, only what I picked up from newspapers I read while hiding in a motel room with the curtains drawn. She took over her father's company after he lost nearly everything to bad investments and worse partners, and in 5 years, she turned it into one of the fastest-growing firms in the country. People say she trusts no one. People say she has never once been photographed smiling in a business meeting. People say a lot of things about powerful people, and most of it is usually wrong. But something about the way everyone lowers their voice when they say her name tells me this time it might be true. I push my cart down the hallway and start with the small conference room at the end, wiping fingerprints off a glass table that probably costs more than the car I used to drive. The work is mindless, almost soothing, and for the first time in weeks, my mind is quiet enough to actually think. I think about my men, the ones still alive, and hiding somewhere I cannot reach them. I think about my cousin's face the last time I saw him, and how I never saw the betrayal coming, even though it was standing right in front of me the whole time. I think about Cross, and how patient he must be feeling right now, certain that sooner or later, I will make a mistake and he will find me. I am so lost in these thoughts that I almost do not notice the light spilling out from under a door at the far end of the hallway. I stop pushing the cart and listen. It is nearly midnight, and every other office on this floor is dark and empty, but there is light coming from behind a set of frosted glass doors with gold lettering that reads, Voss Industries, Office of the Chief Executive. Someone is still here. For a moment, I think about turning around and starting somewhere else, letting whoever is inside finish their work in peace. But curiosity gets the better of me, the same curiosity that used to keep me alive in a business where the smallest detail could mean the difference between profit and disaster. I push the cart closer, careful to keep my footsteps quiet out of old habit, and through the frosted glass, I can make out the shape of a woman standing at a window, looking out over the city lights with her arms crossed and her shoulders tight with tension. I should keep moving. Every instinct built over years of staying alive in a dangerous business tells me to keep moving, to avoid the boss, to avoid anyone who might remember my face later. But something about the stillness of her posture stops me. She is not working. She is not on the phone. She is simply standing there, alone, at midnight, staring out at a city that apparently answers to her, and she looks like she is carrying a weight nobody else can see. I understand that feeling better than I want to admit. I decide to clean the hallway outside her office, instead of interrupting her, telling myself it has nothing to do with curiosity and everything to do with efficiency. I work slowly, wiping down the glass walls that separate the hallway from the executive offices, and every few minutes, I catch another glimpse of her through the frosted glass. She has dark hair pulled back into a low knot, and even from this distance I can see the sharp lines of her jaw, the kind of face that belongs on the cover of a magazine, rather than behind a desk running a company worth billions. But it is not her looks that hold my attention. It is the way she stands, straight-backed and unmoving, like she has trained herself never to let anyone see her waver, even when she believes no one is watching. I know that posture. I used to wear it myself, every single day, in every meeting where the wrong word could cost me everything. After nearly 20 minutes, she finally moves, walking back to her desk and sitting down, and I force myself to move on to the next floor, before I do something foolish like knock on her door and ask if she is all right. That is not who I am anymore. I am Danny Marsh, a janitor with no past and no future, beyond finishing my shift and disappearing back into the small apartment I am renting, under a name that is not mine. I have no business wondering about the private thoughts of a billionaire CEO who would call security the moment she learned who I really was. The rest of the night passes without incident. I finish the 40th floor and move down to the 39th, then the 38th, working through empty offices filled with expensive furniture and framed photographs of people smiling at events I will never attend. By the time the sun starts to rise over the city skyline, my body aches in ways it never used to after a full day of running a criminal organization, and there is something almost funny about that if I let myself think about it too long. Carl meets me at the loading dock as my shift ends, clipboard in hand, checking off my name against his list. He asks how the first night went, and I tell him it was fine, quiet, no problems. He seems satisfied with that answer, and tells me to be back at 11 tonight. Same time, same floors. I nod and walk out into the gray early morning light, and it is only once I am 3 blocks away, blending into the crowd of people heading to their own ordinary jobs, that I let myself breathe fully for the first time since I put on that uniform. I do not know why the image of Elena Voss standing alone at that window keeps coming back to me as I walk. I do not know why a woman I have never spoken to, a woman who represents everything my old life was built to profit from, has managed to occupy space in a mind that should be entirely focused on survival. I tell myself it means nothing. I tell myself I will forget her face by tomorrow, the same way I have trained myself to forget every face that does not matter to my survival. But some part of me, the part that used to read people for a living, and was rarely wrong, already suspects that Elena Voss is going to matter a great deal more than I want her to. I do not know yet that she noticed me too, or that 3 floors above the hallway I cleaned that night, she stood at her window and watched the new janitor move through the darkness with the kind of careful, controlled precision that most cleaning staff never bother to have. I do not know that something about the way I carried myself, the way I checked every exit before entering a room out of pure instinct, struck her as familiar in a way she could not yet explain. I only know that when I finally lie down to sleep that morning in my small rented room, my mind keeps replaying the image of a woman standing alone at a window 40 floors above the city, carrying a weight she refuses to let anyone see, and for reasons I cannot fully explain, I find myself hoping I will see her again tomorrow night. I tell myself it is only curiosity. I am wrong about that too. Sleep does not come easily. I lie on a mattress that is too thin, staring at a ceiling stained with old water damage, and my mind refuses to settle. In my old life, I would have already known everything about Elena Voss before I ever set foot in her building. I would have known her schedule, her allies, her weaknesses, the names of everyone she trusted and everyone who wanted to see her fail. That was how I survived for so long, by knowing more about the people around me than they knew about themselves. Now I know nothing, except the sound of her heels on marble and the shape of her shoulders against a window, and somehow that ignorance feels more dangerous than any enemy I have ever faced. I remind myself why I am here, not to notice beautiful women standing alone in glass offices, not to wonder about the private sadness of a stranger who could destroy me with a single phone call if she ever learned the truth. I am here to disappear, to become so unremarkable that Nathaniel Cross forgets I ever existed, until the day I am strong enough to make sure he regrets ever coming after my family. Eventually exhaustion wins where logic fails, and I fall into a shallow, restless sleep. My last thought before darkness takes me is not about Cross, or my cousin's betrayal, or the men I lost. It is about a woman at a window 40 floors above the city, and the strange, unwelcome certainty that our paths are only beginning to cross. Someone is watching me, and I know it the second I step off the elevator on the 40th floor. It is not paranoia. Paranoia kept me alive for years, but this is different, sharper, a prickling awareness at the back of my neck that only comes from years of knowing when eyes are on you. I scan the hallway without turning my head, the way I trained myself to do, long before I ever picked up a mop. The hallway is empty. The offices are dark, but the feeling does not go away, and when I glance toward the frosted glass doors at the end of the corridor, I see her silhouette standing just inside, perfectly still, watching me the way I once watched rivals across a negotiating table. Elena Voss. I keep pushing my cart, forcing my movements to stay slow and ordinary, the movements of a tired janitor with nothing on his mind but finishing his shift. I do not look at her directly. I have survived this long by never giving anyone a reason to look twice at me, and the last thing I need is for the woman who owns this building to start wondering why her new cleaning staff moves like someone trained to notice everything in a room within seconds of entering it. But she does not look away. I can feel her eyes on me as I clean the conference room 2 doors down from her office, and when I finally risk a glance in her direction, she is still there, arms crossed, studying me with an expression I cannot quite read. It is not suspicion, not exactly. It is something closer to recognition, like she is trying to remember where she has seen a face before and cannot quite place it. I finish the conference room faster than I should and move on to the next floor, telling myself the feeling in my chest is relief. It is not relief. It is something closer to disappointment, and I do not like that one bit. Over the following week, I fall into a rhythm. I arrive at 11, work my way down from the 40th floor, and somewhere along the way, I always find myself near her office, even when my assigned route does not technically require it. I tell myself this is coincidence. I tell myself the executive floor simply has more windows to clean and more glass to wipe down. I know I am lying to myself, and for a man who spent his entire adult life reading lies in other people, I am doing a remarkably poor job of catching my own. Elena works late almost every night. Sometimes she is on the phone, her voice sharp and controlled even when I cannot make out the words through the glass. Sometimes she is alone at her desk, papers spread out in front of her, a small crease between her eyebrows that never seems to fully disappear. And sometimes, like that first night, she simply stands at the window and stares out at the city, carrying whatever weight sits on her shoulders in complete silence. I learn small things about her without meaning to. I learn that she takes her coffee black and drinks entirely too much of it. I learn that she keeps a framed photograph on her desk of an older man who I assume must be her father, and that she never looks directly at it when she is in the room, as if the picture alone is enough to remind her of something she would rather not think about. I learn that she is kind to the security staff, remembering their names and asking about their families, even though half the executives in this building cannot be bothered to look at the people who protect them. I also learn that she notices everything, the same way I do, and that noticing everything about someone is a dangerous habit to share with a stranger you are trying to avoid. On the 9th night, everything changes. I am cleaning the small kitchen area near her office, wiping down the counters and refilling the coffee machine for the morning staff, when I hear footsteps behind me. I do not need to turn around to know who it is. Something in the rhythm of the steps, controlled and deliberate, tells me exactly who has just walked into the room. "Good evening," she says, and her voice is lower than I expected, warm in a way that surprises me, given everything I have heard about her reputation. I turn around and keep my expression carefully neutral, the same blank politeness I have practiced every night since starting this job. "Good evening," I say. "I am almost finished in here. I can come back later if you need the space." She shakes her head and moves toward the coffee machine, standing closer to me than strictly necessary for someone simply making a late-night drink. "You are new," she says. "I have not seen you before this week." "Started on Monday," I tell her, keeping my voice steady. "Name's Danny." She studies my face for a long moment, longer than the question requires, and I feel the familiar tension of a lie sitting heavy in my chest, waiting to be discovered. "Danny," she repeats slowly, like she is testing the name against something in her memory, and finding it does not quite fit. "Well, Danny, you clean faster and more thoroughly than anyone else on this floor. Most people rush through the executive level because they think no one is paying attention. You do not." "I learned a long time ago that the details matter," I say, and the moment the words leave my mouth I regret them. It is too honest an answer, too close to a truth I cannot afford to reveal. She raises an eyebrow, clearly intrigued rather than suspicious, at least for now. That is an unusual thing for a janitor to say. I offer a small, practiced smile, the kind I used to give to men I was about to outmaneuver in a negotiation. "Old habits," I say. "I used to work somewhere that cared a great deal about details." "Where was that?" she asks, and there is something in her tone that tells me this is no longer casual small talk. This is Elena Voss doing exactly what made her successful in the first place, asking simple questions and listening carefully for the cracks in the answers. I keep my voice light and vague, the way I have practiced 100 times in the mirror of my rented room. "Different city, different life," I say. "Nothing worth talking about." She does not push further, though I can tell she wants to, and instead, she takes her coffee and turns to leave the kitchen. But at the doorway she pauses and looks back at me, and there is something in her expression that makes my chest tighten with an emotion I have not felt in a very long time, something that is not quite fear and not quite hope. "Good night, Danny," she says, and there is a strange weight on the way she says the name, as if she already suspects it is not the right one. I stand alone in the kitchen for a long moment after she leaves, my heart pounding harder than it has any right to over such a simple conversation. I remind myself that this is dangerous, that every extra second I spend in her orbit is a second closer to being discovered. I remind myself that I came here to disappear, not to be noticed by the one person in this building sharp enough to see through a disguise that has fooled everyone else. But some part of me, a part I thought Cross had burned out of me, along with everything else I used to have, cannot stop thinking about the way she said my false name, like she already knew there was a real one hiding underneath it. The following nights bring more small conversations. She finds reasons to be near me, and I find myself unable to avoid her the way I know I should. She asks about my life before this job, and I give her careful half-truths, wrapped around enough real detail to sound believable. I tell her I grew up in a rough part of the city, which is true. I tell her I used to work in logistics, which is technically not a lie. I do not tell her that my logistics involved shipments that never appeared on any official record, or that the company I once ran answered to no government and no law. She tells me things too, more than I expect a woman in her position to share with someone she believes is simply the night janitor. She tells me about her father, about how he built the company from nothing, and then nearly lost it all to men he trusted too easily. She tells me she inherited more than a business when he stepped down. She inherited his enemies, and most days it feels like she is still fighting a war he started decades before she was ready for it. She tells me she trusts almost no one inside these walls, and something about the way she says it makes me wonder if she already senses that I am the one exception she has not yet decided how to explain. I know I should stop these conversations before they go any further. I know that every word she learns about me, even the careful lies, brings her one step closer to recognizing something true. But there is a loneliness in her that mirrors something inside me so closely, it frightens me. And for the first time since I put on this uniform, I find myself looking forward to a shift instead of simply surviving it. On the 14th night, everything I have been trying to avoid finally happens. I am cleaning near the elevators when a man in an expensive suit steps out, moving with the kind of unhurried confidence that only comes from serious money or serious danger, sometimes both at once. He does not look at me, the way most people in this building never look at me, and he walks straight toward Elena's office without waiting to be announced. I keep my head down, and my cart moving, but something about the man's face pulls at a memory I cannot immediately place. A face I have seen before in a different life, in a different room, under very different circumstances. I do not have time to place it before he disappears through the frosted glass doors, and through the glass I watch Elena's posture change instantly, her shoulders squaring, her expression hardening into something cold and guarded that I have not seen on her before. I cannot hear the conversation clearly, but I can see enough through the glass to know it is not friendly. The man leans forward across her desk, his hands flat on the surface, and Elena does not back away, does not flinch, but there is tension in every line of her body that tells me she is more afraid of this man than she wants anyone to know. I find myself moving closer to the door, telling myself I am simply cleaning the hallway, though we both know that is not entirely true. When the man finally leaves, he walks past me without a second glance, and it is only once he steps into the elevator that the memory finally clicks into place, and my blood turns cold with recognition. I know that face. I have seen it in old photographs, in files I once kept on men who did business with people I could never fully trust. That man works for Nathaniel Cross, and he was just in Elena Voss's office. I stand frozen by my cart for a long moment, my mind racing through every possible explanation, none of them good. Cross does not send his people into random buildings without a reason. Every meeting, every handshake, every quiet visit to an executive office is a calculated move designed to gain something, whether it is information, leverage, or control. If a man like that is walking into Elena Voss's office without an appointment and without hesitation, it means Cross already has some kind of foothold inside this company, some connection I do not yet understand. I finish my shift on autopilot, my hands going through the motions of wiping counters and emptying bins, while my mind stays locked on the image of that man leaning across Elena's desk. By the time I step outside into the cold morning air, I have already decided I need more information. Even though every rational part of my brain tells me that gathering information means staying close to danger, and staying close to danger is exactly what I promised myself I would not do. I do not sleep well that day. I keep replaying the tension in Elena's shoulders, the careful stillness of her hands, as she faced a man who clearly unsettled her more than she wanted to show. I think about the way she spoke of enemies she inherited from her father, wars she never asked to fight. I wonder if she has any idea who the man in her office actually works for, or if she believes he is simply another difficult business contact, one more name on a long list of people trying to take something from her company. By the time I return for my next shift, I have convinced myself to be careful, to keep my distance, to remember exactly why I took this job in the first place. But when the elevator doors open onto the 40th floor, and I see the light still burning under her office door, every promise I made to myself during the daylight hours evaporates in an instant. I find her sitting at her desk, staring at a single sheet of paper, like it might rearrange itself into something less frightening if she looks at it long enough. She does not notice me right away, and for a moment, I allow myself simply to watch her, to see the exhaustion she hides so carefully during the day finally show itself in the quiet privacy of an empty office. When she finally looks up and sees me standing in the doorway, she does not startle the way most people would. Instead, she simply exhales, as if my presence is somehow a relief rather than an interruption. "You should not still be here," I say, keeping my voice gentle, careful not to push too hard against whatever wall she has built around whatever is troubling her. "Neither should you," she answers, and there is a tired half-smile on her face that makes something in my chest ache in a way I have not felt in years. I hesitate at the doorway, torn between every instinct telling me to walk away, and a stronger pull that keeps my feet firmly planted where they are. "Rough day," I finally say, though we both know it is an understatement. She looks at the paper in front of her, then back at me, and for a moment, I think she might actually tell me the truth. "Rough would be one word for it," she says quietly. She does not elaborate, and I do not push, though every part of me wants to ask about the man who left her office shaking with barely contained anger just hours earlier. Instead, I ask if she wants me to come back later, and she shakes her head, gesturing toward the small couch near the window instead of her desk. "Stay a minute," she says. "I could use the company of someone who is not trying to take something from me." I know I should refuse. I know that every minute I spend in this office, in her company, brings me closer to a danger I cannot fully control. But I sit down anyway, keeping enough distance to seem respectful, while close enough that she does not have to raise her voice. And for a while, we simply sit in comfortable silence, while the city lights glitter beyond the window. It is the first time since Cross destroyed my old life that I have felt something close to peace, and the thought terrifies me almost as much as the man who walked out of this office an hour before I arrived. The gala is the last place I want to be, and yet here I am, standing against a marble wall in a black jacket that fits too well for a man who is supposed to be invisible. Voss Industries is celebrating some anniversary I do not fully understand, and Carl volunteered half the night cleaning staff to work the event as extra hands, refilling drinks and clearing plates, while the real guests mingle beneath crystal chandeliers that probably cost more than most people earn in a decade. I did not want to come. Crowds mean eyes, and eyes mean risk, and every risk brings me closer to a mistake I cannot afford to make. But refusing would have drawn more attention than simply showing up and disappearing into the background the way I have trained myself to do in every room I enter. I keep my head down and my tray full, moving through clusters of wealthy guests who do not look twice at the staff serving them. It should feel familiar, this kind of invisibility, the same way it felt on the cleaning floors these past weeks. But something about the ballroom, the low murmur of powerful people trading favors and information behind polite smiles, reminds me too much of the world I used to move through as an equal instead of a servant, and the reminder sits uncomfortably in my chest. I spot Elena near the center of the room, dressed in deep red, commanding the space the way she commands every room I have watched her enter. She moves between conversations with practiced grace, shaking hands, offering brief compliments, never letting her guard down even for a second. I watch her work the crowd, and understand, not for the first time, that the coldness people describe is not coldness at all. It is armor, built carefully over years of learning that warmth is a weakness other people will always try to exploit. I am halfway across the room with a tray of drinks when our eyes meet. It happens so quickly I almost miss it, a brief flicker of her gaze finding mine across a room full of strangers, but something in her expression shifts the moment our eyes lock, confusion sliding into something sharper, something closer to recognition finally clicking into place. She excuses herself from the conversation she is in and begins moving toward me, and my heart starts pounding in a way that has nothing to do with attraction, and everything to do with the sudden certainty that my disguise is about to fall apart in front of 200 witnesses. I set my tray down on the nearest table and turn to leave, but she reaches me before I can disappear into the crowd, her hand closing around my arm with more strength than her elegant appearance suggests. "We need to talk," she says quietly, her voice pitched low enough that no one else can hear. "Now." I consider lying, considering telling her I do not know what she is talking about, but something in her eyes tells me the moment for careful denials has already passed. I nod once, and she leads me through a side door into a narrow hallway used by catering staff, empty except for stacked chairs and the distant murmur of the party beyond the walls. She turns to face me the moment the door closes, and for a long moment neither of us speaks. I watch her study my face the way she has been studying it for weeks, except now there is no confusion left in her expression, only certainty, and something underneath the certainty that looks almost like fear. "I know who you are," she finally says. I keep my expression carefully blank, though every instinct in my body is screaming at me to run. "I do not know what you mean," I say, and even to my own ears the lie sounds thin. "Do not," she says, her voice sharper now, cutting through the pretense with an edge I have not heard from her before. "My father did business with your family 15 years ago, before everything fell apart. I was a teenager, but I remember the name. I remember the photographs in his study that he thought I never saw. Dante Marchetti does not look like a janitor, no matter how convincing the uniform is. Hearing my real name spoken aloud after weeks of hiding behind a false one feels like a physical blow, and for a moment, I simply stand there, unable to find the words to deny what she already knows to be true. There is no point pretending anymore. Whatever careful disguise I built for myself over the past month has just collapsed in a narrow hallway smelling of caterer's coffee and rented flowers. How long have you known? I finally ask, my voice quieter than I intend. Since the gala started, she says. I saw you across the room and something clicked that I had been trying to place for weeks. The way you carry yourself, the way you never sit with your back to a door, the way you check every exit before you walk into a room. I thought it was strange for a janitor, and now I understand why. I brace myself for what comes next, for security to appear, for her to scream, for every fragile piece of the life I rebuilt these past weeks to shatter completely. Instead, she simply crosses her arms and studies me with an expression I cannot fully read, something caught between anger and curiosity, and an emotion I do not dare name. Why are you here? She asks. Not at this gala. Here, in my building, pretending to be someone you are not. Men like you do not clean offices for minimum wage. What are you running from? I consider lying again, but I am tired, so tired of carrying every secret alone, and something about the directness of her question, the way she demands the truth, instead of simply assuming the worst, makes me want to give her an honest answer for the first time in weeks. I tell her everything, or close to everything. I tell her about Cross, about the war that took my men and burned my apartment and forced me into hiding under a name that is not mine. I tell her I never intended to come anywhere near her company specifically, that I simply needed a place invisible enough that no one would think to look for me here. I tell her I never meant to notice her the way I have, standing alone at her window every night, carrying weight she refuses to share with anyone. She listens without interrupting, her expression shifting through several emotions I cannot fully track, and when I finally finish speaking, the hallway falls into a silence that stretches long enough to make my chest tight with dread. That man who visited my office 2 weeks ago, she finally says, the one who left me shaking with anger after he threatened to destroy everything my father built, unless I agreed to terms that would hand him control of half my company. Tell me his name. My blood runs cold. Describe him, I say, though some part of me already knows the answer before she speaks. She describes him precisely, down to the scar above his eyebrow and the ring he wears on his right hand, and every detail matches a face I recognized weeks ago from old files I once kept on Cross and his closest associates. That is Marcus Feld, I tell her. He works directly for the man who destroyed my life. If he came to your office demanding control of your company, it is not because Cross wants your business. It is because he wants leverage against me, and somehow he already knows I am connected to you, or he is about to find out. Elena's face goes pale, and for the first time since this conversation started, I see real fear crack through her carefully maintained composure. He never mentioned you, she says. He talked about outdated contracts and supply agreements my father signed years ago, threats about lawsuits and public scandal if I did not cooperate. I thought it was simply corporate pressure. It is never simply corporate pressure with Cross, I say. Everything he does serves multiple purposes at once. If he is pressuring your company, it is either because he wants resources to fund his war against my remaining allies, or because he has somehow learned that I am hiding inside these walls and intends to use your company as a weapon against me directly. She is quiet for a long moment, processing everything I have just told her, and I watch her mind work through the implications with the same sharp precision that built her company into what it is today. When she finally speaks again, her voice carries a steadiness that surprises me, given everything she just learned. I should call the police, she says. I should report you, report everything you just told me, and let the authorities handle a man dangerous enough to threaten my company and hide inside it at the same time. I nod slowly, accepting the words even as something in my chest tightens painfully at the thought of losing whatever fragile connection has grown between us these past weeks. I understand, I say. I will be gone before your shift starts tomorrow. You will never see me again. But she shakes her head, and the movement surprises me enough that I actually take a step back. That is not what I said I would do, she says. I said I should. I did not say I will. I stare at her, uncertain how to respond, torn between hope and suspicion, built from years of learning that trust is usually a trap disguised as kindness. Why not? I finally ask. I am exactly the kind of danger you should be running from, not protecting. Her expression softens slightly, though the sharpness never fully leaves her eyes. Because whatever brought Marcus Feld into my office was already happening before you walked into this building, she says. Because I have spent 5 years fighting people trying to take what my father built, and I have never once had someone on my side who actually understands how men like Cross think. And because, whether I like it or not, I have not felt safe in this company in longer than I care to admit, and somehow, despite everything you just told me, I feel safer standing in this hallway with you than I have felt in months. The admission hangs in the air between us, heavier than either of us seems prepared for, and for a long moment neither of us speaks. Somewhere beyond the door, the party continues without us, oblivious to the conversation that just changed everything about the fragile world I built for myself inside these walls. I do not know what to say, I finally admit, and the honesty surprises even me. Then do not say anything, she answers. Just help me figure out what Cross actually wants, and we will decide together what happens after that. I know I should refuse. Every rational part of my mind understands that staying close to Elena Voss means staying close to exactly the kind of exposure I came here to avoid, and that involving her further in a war she did not choose could put her in more danger than she currently understands. But there is something in the steady certainty of her gaze, something in the way she chose partnership over fear, despite every reason she has to run in the opposite direction, that makes refusing impossible. All right, I say quietly. We figure it out together. She holds out her hand, a strange formal gesture given everything that just passed between us, and I take it, feeling the same current of awareness I have felt every time we have been close enough to touch these past weeks. Her grip is firm, steady, nothing like the fragile billionaire the newspapers describe. Welcome to the team, Dante, she says, and hearing my real name spoken with something close to warmth, instead of fear, feels like the first honest moment I have had in over a month. We return to the party separately, several minutes apart to avoid drawing attention, and I spend the rest of the evening carrying trays through a crowd of strangers, while carrying a secret far heavier than any I managed inside these walls before tonight. But underneath the fear, underneath the certainty that Cross is closer than I realized, and more dangerous than either of us fully understands yet, there is something else growing steadily in my chest, something I have not felt in longer than I can remember. For the first time since my world burned down around me, I do not feel entirely alone. The party stretches on for another hour, and I move through it differently now, aware of Elena across the room, in a way that has nothing to do with hiding, and everything to do with a strange new sense of shared purpose. Every time our eyes happen to meet across the crowded ballroom, there is a flicker of something unspoken passing between us. An understanding that the ground beneath both our lives has just shifted in a direction neither of us fully anticipated. I catch fragments of conversation as I carry trays through the room, board members discussing quarterly earnings, investors asking careful questions about supply contracts, none of them aware that the woman at the center of their celebration is quietly carrying the weight of a threat most of them cannot imagine. I wonder how many people in this room actually know her, really know her, beyond the careful public image she has built to survive, in a world that expects women in her position to be either soft or ruthless, with no space allowed in between. Near midnight, I am clearing empty glasses from a table near the edge of the room, when an older woman in a silver dress stops beside me, watching Elena work the crowd with an expression of quiet pride mixed with concern. She works too hard, the woman says, more to herself than to me, though she glances my way as if expecting agreement. Ever since her father stepped down, she has not taken a single vacation, 5 years, and I do not think that girl has slept a full night in any of them. I do not respond beyond a polite nod, unwilling to reveal how much more I already know about the burdens Elena carries. But the woman's words stay with me for the rest of the evening, another piece of the picture slowly forming in my mind, a picture of a woman who inherited not just a company, but an entire war, fighting battles on multiple fronts, while the world around her assumes she simply enjoys the comfort of wealth and power. By the time the gala finally winds down and guests begin filtering out into the cold night air, I am exhausted in a way that has nothing to do with the physical work of carrying trays for 6 hours straight. My mind keeps circling back to the conversation in that narrow hallway, replaying every word, every expression, every moment, where Elena chose trust over fear, despite every reasonable instinct telling her to do the opposite. I help with the final cleanup, alongside the rest of the staff, stacking chairs and clearing the last scattered glasses from abandoned tables, and I am nearly finished when I notice Elena standing near the entrance, having apparently said goodbye to the last of her guests. She catches my eye across the emptying ballroom, and instead of looking away the way I might have expected given everything that happened tonight, she offers a small nod, an acknowledgement that feels like a promise neither of us has said out loud yet. Carl finds me near the loading dock as the cleanup crew finishes packing away the last of the equipment, clipboard in hand as always, checking names off his list with the same tired efficiency he brings to every shift. "Good work tonight," he says, barely glancing up from his clipboard. Miss Voss mentioned the service was excellent, rare for her to notice the staff at all, so consider that a compliment. I nod and thank him, though the words feel strange given everything that actually happened behind that catering hallway door tonight. As I walk out into the early morning air, my mind is already racing ahead to tomorrow, to the conversation Elena and I still need to have about Marcus Feld, about Cross, about exactly how much danger her company might already be sitting inside, without fully understanding it yet. I think about my old life, about the version of myself that would have handled a threat like Cross with calculated violence and cold precision, never once considering the possibility of an ally like Elena Voss standing beside me instead of beneath me as a pawn to be used and discarded. That version of myself would have seen her company as leverage, her trust as a weakness to exploit rather than a gift to protect. I am not entirely sure who I am anymore, standing on this sidewalk in a rented tuxedo, with a false name still stitched into my identification. But for the first time since Cross burned my old life to the ground, I feel something closer to purpose than survival. Whatever happens next, whatever Cross is planning, whatever danger Elena has unknowingly walked into by choosing to trust me, I am no longer facing it entirely alone. That thought alone is enough to carry me through the long walk home, as the city slowly wakes up around me, unaware that somewhere above its streets, in a glass tower 40 floors high, two people who should never have crossed paths have just decided to face a dangerous enemy together instead of running from him separately. The security footage freezes on a grainy image of Marcus Feld shaking hands with a man I never expected to see again, and my stomach drops before Elena even says a word. We are sitting in her office 3 nights after the gala, the door locked, the blinds drawn, a laptop open on the desk between us showing footage she pulled from the building's private security archive. She found the recording while digging through visitor logs, trying to understand exactly how deep Cross had already reached into her company, before either of us realized the danger sitting right beside her. "That man works in our finance department," she says quietly, pointing at the screen where Marcus Feld stands in a parking garage, exchanging what looks like a folder of documents with a nervous-looking employee I do not recognize. "Peter Langston. He has worked here for 6 years. I trusted him with quarterly reports, budget projections, information that should never leave this building. I study the frozen image carefully, the careful posture of both men, the quick exchange designed to look casual to anyone who might glance their way. This is not a coincidence, I say. Cross does not send men like Feld to make small talk. If Langston is passing information, Cross already knows more about your company's finances than your own board members do." Elena closes the laptop with more force than necessary, frustration and fear both clearly visible on her face, despite her usual composure. "Why?" she asks. "What does he actually want from my company? You said this was about leverage against you, but Feld never once mentioned your name in our meeting. He talked about old contracts, about lawsuits, about forcing me to sell shares I have spent 5 years refusing to give up." I lean back in my chair, my mind working through the pieces the same way I used to analyze threats in my old life, searching for the pattern hiding beneath the surface details. "Cross builds leverage in layers," I explain. "He is not just after your company for its own sake. Voss Industries controls shipping contracts along the Eastern Corridor, warehouses, distribution networks that used to belong partially to my family before everything fell apart. If he gains enough control over your company, he gains control over infrastructure he could use to move product without anyone asking questions. And if he learns I am hiding somewhere inside your walls, controlling your company becomes a way to trap me completely, cutting off every possible escape route at once. Elena's face pales as the full scope of the danger settles in. So this was never really about me, she says quietly. I am just a piece on a board Cross is using to reach something bigger. I shake my head, wanting to offer some comfort even though the truth is uncomfortable. You are not just a piece, I say. Your company matters to him because it is genuinely valuable, and you matter because you refuse to hand over control easily. But yes, whatever plan Cross set into motion against your company likely started before I ever walked through your doors, and my presence here has only raised the stakes for both of us. She is quiet for a long moment, processing everything, and when she finally speaks again, her voice carries a determination I have come to recognize as entirely her own. Then we stop him, she says simply. Not just for your sake, for mine too. I refuse to let a man like that dismantle everything my father built because he thinks I am too weak or too distracted to notice what he is doing inside my own company. Something about her certainty, her refusal to be a passive victim in a war she never asked for, reminds me powerfully of the version of myself I used to be before Cross tore my life apart. The version who never backed down from a fight regardless of the odds stacked against him. Over the following days, Elena and I begin working together in earnest, meeting late at night after the rest of the building empties out, piecing together the full picture of what Cross has been building inside her company. I teach her how to read the small signals I learned to notice over years running my own organization, the careful language men like Feld use to disguise threats as business negotiations, the patterns hidden inside seemingly ordinary financial transactions. She teaches me things too, about corporate structures and legal loopholes I never had reason to understand in my old life, about the specific vulnerabilities Cross might be planning to exploit within her board and her shareholder agreements. We discover that Langston has been quietly feeding information to Feld for nearly 3 months, well before I ever set foot inside Voss Tower, confirming what I already suspected, that Cross's interest in Elena's company predates my arrival entirely. But we also discover something far more troubling buried inside months of financial records. Elena pulls late one night, a series of shell companies with connections tracing back to accounts I recognize immediately from my old life. Accounts that once funneled resources through my own organization before Cross seized control of them. He is not just threatening your company anymore, I tell her, staring at the screen with a growing sense of dread. He is already moving money through it. If these transactions are real, Cross has been laundering resources through Voss Industries for weeks, using shell companies that connect directly back to operations he stole from my family. Elena's hands tighten into fists on the desk, anger replacing the fear that flickered across her face moments earlier. Then we have proof, she says. Proof that connects him directly to my company. Proof we could take to the authorities if we handle this carefully enough. I shake my head slowly, understanding the danger better than she does. Men like Cross do not leave proof that leads back to them easily, I explain. Whatever we found is likely designed to implicate someone else, if it is ever discovered. Probably you, or Langston, or some other convenient scapegoat he has already prepared. Taking this to the authorities without understanding exactly how deep his protection runs could destroy your company and your reputation before it ever touches him. Frustration flashes across her face, but underneath it, I can see her mind already working through alternatives, searching for another path forward, the same way she has clearly done countless times before in this ongoing battle against forces trying to take what belongs to her. Then what do you suggest? She asks. We cannot simply wait for him to make his next move while he quietly dismantles everything I have built. I consider the question carefully, weighing options I have not allowed myself to think about since I first put on that janitor's uniform and promised myself I would stay hidden no matter what. We confront it directly, I finally say. Not through the authorities yet, not through public exposure that could backfire against you. We use what we know about Langston to trace exactly how far this network extends inside your company, and we use that information to cut Cross off before he can finish whatever he is planning. That means staying involved, she says quietly, watching my face carefully. That means stepping further into exactly the kind of danger you came here trying to escape. I meet her gaze steadily, surprising myself with how easily the answer comes. It means finishing what Cross started, I say. I have been running for weeks, hiding behind a uniform and a false name, telling myself survival meant staying invisible. But watching him try to take something from you, something you built with your own hands, the same way I once built something with mine, makes me realize hiding was never actually going to save me. Sooner or later, Cross would have found me regardless. At least this way, I choose the fight instead of waiting for it to find me. Elena studies me for a long moment, something shifting in her expression that goes beyond simple gratitude or relief. "Why does this matter so much to you?" she finally asks. "Beyond simply surviving, Cross, why does protecting my company matter to a man who has no real reason to care what happens to Voss Industries beyond your own survival?" The question catches me off guard, and I find myself searching for an honest answer, instead of a convenient deflection. "Because you never once treated me like a criminal, hiding in your building," I finally say. "You could have called security the moment you recognized my face. You could have used what you learned about me as leverage, the same way Cross uses information as a weapon against everyone around him. Instead, you chose to trust someone who gave you every reason not to, and that kind of choice deserves more than silence in return." Something softens in her expression, and for a long moment neither of us speaks, the weight of unspoken understanding filling the space between us more completely than words ever could. "Then we finish this together," she finally says, breaking the silence with quiet determination. "Whatever it takes." I nod, feeling something settle inside my chest that has been missing since the night my apartment burned and my old life ended in fire and betrayal. Together, I agree. Neither of us fully understands yet exactly how dangerous the coming days will become, or how close Cross already is to discovering the truth about my presence inside these walls. But sitting across from Elena Voss in the quiet privacy of her office, surrounded by evidence of a threat larger than either of us fully anticipated, I feel something I have not felt in longer than I can remember. I feel ready to fight instead of simply survive. We spend the next several nights building a plan carefully, piece by piece, the way I once planned every major move within my old organization. Except this time, the goal is not expansion or profit, but survival for two people who never should have found each other in the first place. Elena arranges for a quiet internal audit, under the guise of routine financial review, giving us a legitimate reason to examine every account connected to Langston without raising immediate suspicion among the rest of the board. I teach her how to spot the small inconsistencies that reveal a shell company's true purpose, the way legitimate businesses leave detailed paper trails, while companies built purely to launder money tend to have gaps that trained eyes can spot immediately. She catches on faster than I expect, her natural instinct for numbers and patterns proving just as sharp as the instincts that kept me alive in a much more dangerous kind of business. On the fourth night of digging, we find something that changes everything. Buried inside a subsidiary account created only 8 weeks earlier, we discover a wire transfer scheduled to process in 5 days. An amount large enough to represent a significant percentage of the company's available capital, routed through 3 separate shell companies, before landing in an account I recognize instantly from my old life, one that used to belong to my organization before Cross seized it during the takeover. "He is not just laundering money through your company anymore," I tell her, staring at the numbers with a growing sense of urgency. "He is preparing to drain it. 5 days from now, a transfer this size will move through your accounts and disappear into a network he controls completely. If this goes through, you will not just lose money. You will lose enough capital to destabilize the entire company, giving him exactly the kind of leverage he needs to force a takeover through your board." Elena's face goes pale as the reality sets in, but instead of panic, I watch her expression harden into the same cold determination I have come to recognize as entirely her own. "Then we stop the transfer," she says immediately. "We freeze the account, alert the board, shut this down before it ever has a chance to process." I shake my head slowly, understanding a danger she has not yet considered. "If we move too obviously, Cross will know immediately that someone inside your company discovered his plan," I explain. "He has eyes inside these walls through Langston, and the moment he realizes we are onto him, he will either accelerate his timeline or disappear completely, and try a different approach we might not see coming until it is too late. We need to move carefully, quietly, cutting him off without ever revealing exactly how we found him. She considers this for a long moment, her mind clearly working through the same careful calculations I learned to make instinctively over years of navigating dangerous situations. "What do you suggest?" she finally asks. I lay out the plan slowly, watching her expression shift from uncertainty to cautious confidence as the pieces come together. "We let the transfer request move forward exactly as scheduled," I explain, "but we quietly redirect the account permissions so that the final authorization requires a secondary approval only you control personally, something Langston would have no reason to know about, since it falls outside his normal access. When Cross tries to complete the transfer, it will fail silently, appearing to him and Feld as nothing more than a technical banking delay rather than deliberate interference. That buys us time to trace exactly how far his network extends inside your company before he realizes we have discovered anything at all." Elena studies the plan carefully, asking sharp questions about implementation, about how to explain the change in account permissions if anyone happens to notice, about contingencies if Cross moves faster than we anticipate. Her questions remind me again why she built a billion-dollar company from the wreckage her father left behind, why people who underestimate her tend to regret it quickly once they realize the sharp mind operating behind her carefully composed exterior. By the time we finish planning, the sun is beginning to rise outside her office windows, painting the city skyline in soft shades of orange and gold. We sit in comfortable silence for a moment, both of us exhausted, but energized by the sense of finally moving forward, instead of simply reacting to threats we do not fully understand. "Thank you," Elena says quietly, breaking the silence, "for staying, for choosing to fight this, instead of disappearing the moment things got complicated." I meet her gaze, surprised by how easily gratitude and something warmer mix together in her expression. "I could say the same to you," I answer honestly. "Most people in your position would have called security the moment they suspected the truth. You chose something harder instead." She smiles slightly, tired but genuine, and for a moment, the careful distance we have maintained since that hallway conversation at the gala feels thinner than it has in weeks. "We make a good team," she says simply. I nod, unable to disagree, though some quiet part of me already senses that whatever is building between us extends far beyond simple partnership against a common enemy. As I finally leave her office to begin my regular shift, disappearing back into the role of quiet janitor for a few more hours before daylight fully arrives, I find myself thinking not about Cross or the danger closing in around both of us, but about the warmth in Elena's eyes when she thanked me, and how badly I want to protect not just her company, but her, from everything Nathaniel Cross is capable of unleashing on people who dare to stand against him. 5 days remain before the transfer attempt. 5 days to trace Cross's full network inside Voss Industries, before he realizes his plan has already begun to unravel. I do not know yet how close he already is to discovering my presence inside these walls, or how quickly this careful, quiet war we are fighting is about to become something far more dangerous than either of us has fully prepared for. The transfer fails exactly as planned, and for 6 hours, I actually believe we might have gotten away with it. Then Carl finds me at the start of my shift, his face pale and serious in a way I have never seen from him before, and tells me security wants to speak with the new janitor about some irregularities in the building access logs. My stomach drops immediately, every instinct honed over years of dangerous business, screaming that something has gone badly wrong. I do not go to security. Instead, I find the nearest stairwell and climb quickly to the 40th floor, moving faster than any janitor reasonably should, my mind racing through every possible explanation for why building security would suddenly take interest in access logs 3 days after we quietly redirected Elena's account permissions. I find her in her office, standing at her desk with her phone pressed to her ear, her face tight with barely controlled fury. She sees me enter and holds up a hand, finishing her call with clipped, efficient sentences, before setting the phone down and turning to face me fully. "Langston is gone," she says immediately. "Cleared out his desk sometime overnight, did not show up for work this morning, and according to building security, Someone used his access badge to enter the server room at 3 this morning, well after he would have already left the building. My blood runs cold. Cross knows, I say. He must have realized the transfer failed and immediately suspected interference. If someone accessed the server room using Langston's badge, they were likely searching for whatever changes we made to the account permissions, trying to understand exactly how their plan fell apart. Elena's hands grip the edge of her desk tightly. Then he knows someone inside my company is working against him, she says. Does he know it is you? I consider the question carefully, running through everything Cross would need to piece together the truth. He might suspect, I finally say. If he traces the account changes back to your personal authorization, he will know you discovered his plan somehow. Whether he connects that discovery to my presence inside your building depends on how much surveillance he has already been running on both of us. Before either of us can say anything more, my phone buzzes in my pocket, an unfamiliar number displaying on the screen. I answer cautiously, and the voice on the other end sends ice through my veins despite months of trying to prepare myself for exactly this moment. Dante, Nathaniel Cross says, his voice carrying the same calm, controlled menace I remember from every previous encounter. I have to admit, hiding inside Elena Voss's company was clever. Cleverer than I expected from a man who lost everything so quickly. I keep my voice steady, refusing to give him the satisfaction of hearing fear in my response. What do you want, Cross? His laugh is soft, almost gentle, the kind of sound that used to make grown men nervous when I still commanded fear instead of running from it. What I have always wanted, he says simply. Everything that used to belong to your family, and now, thanks to your little friend's company, quite a bit more besides. You have 24 hours to walk away from Voss Tower and never return. If you do not, I will make sure Miss Voss understands exactly what kind of consequences come with harboring a man like you inside her business. The line goes dead before I can respond, and I lower the phone slowly, my mind racing through the implications of what Cross just said. Elena watches my face carefully, reading the tension there before I even explain what happened. He wants me gone, I tell her. 24 hours, or he threatens consequences against your company and against you personally. Elena's expression hardens immediately, any trace of fear replaced by fierce determination that reminds me powerfully of why she has survived 5 years running a company that everyone once assumed she would lose within months of taking over. Then we do not give him 24 hours to plan anything, she says. We move against him now, before he has time to fully execute whatever threat he just made. I hesitate, weighing the danger of moving too quickly against the danger of waiting too long. Moving against Cross directly means stepping fully back into a world I promised myself I would leave behind, I say. It means using methods that could put you in even more danger than you are already facing. She meets my eyes steadily, her voice quiet but absolutely certain. I am already in danger, Dante, she says. The only question now is whether we face it together with everything we know, or wait for him to attack on his own terms while we sit here doing nothing. I know she is right, even as every protective instinct in me wants to find some way to keep her completely separated from the violence I know Cross is capable of unleashing. But hiding has never actually protected anyone I have tried to protect, and pretending otherwise now would only put her in greater danger later. We spend the following hours moving quickly, using everything we uncovered about Langston's network to trace the exact locations where Cross has been laundering resources through Elena's company. I reach out carefully to 2 of my old associates, men I have not contacted since the night my apartment burned, trusting them with information about my location for the first time since everything fell apart. Both confirm what I already suspected, that Cross has been stretched dangerously thin trying to maintain control over territories he seized too quickly, and that a direct challenge to his authority right now, properly executed, could fracture the loyalty of men who only follow him out of fear rather than genuine respect. By evening, we have a plan forming, one that relies less on violence and more on exposure, using the financial evidence Elena and I gathered to reveal Cross's illegal activities to exactly the people who would be most motivated to turn against him, rival organizations who have been waiting for any sign of weakness to challenge his growing power. Before we finalize anything, Elena insists on bringing in her head of legal counsel, a sharp, careful woman named Grace Whitfield, who has worked alongside Elena since the earliest days of taking over the company. I am hesitant to trust anyone new with information this sensitive, but Elena vouches for her without hesitation, and within an hour of hearing the full situation, Grace proves her value by identifying a legal pathway that lets us report the fraudulent shell companies to regulators without exposing Elena to liability for the earlier account manipulation we performed to stop the transfer. Grace works through the night alongside us, drafting careful language that frames our discovery as diligent internal auditing rather than covert interference, protecting Elena's company from any suggestion of wrongdoing while still ensuring the evidence against Cross's network reaches the right authorities at the right moment. Watching the two of them work together, quick and precise, reminds me how much I underestimated the value of allies who fight with words and paperwork instead of fists and threats. Around midnight, Grace looks up from her laptop and studies me for a long moment. I brace myself for suspicion, but instead she simply says that whoever helped Elena piece together a financial trail this complex clearly has real expertise, and asks, half joking, if I would consider consulting for the legal team once this crisis passes. Elena laughs softly for the first time in days, and something in that small, unguarded sound eases a tension I had not realized I was still carrying. It is a dangerous plan, and I tell her so honestly. If this does not work exactly as intended, Cross will know precisely who exposed him, and his retaliation will be swift and merciless against both of us. Elena does not flinch from the risk. Then we make sure it works, she says simply, and something about her unwavering confidence gives me the courage to move forward despite every instinct telling me to protect her by handling this alone. We spend the next 20 hours working almost without rest, verifying every piece of evidence, ensuring nothing we present could be traced back to unauthorized access or illegal methods that could expose Elena's company to legal consequences of its own. My old associates help coordinate a careful release of information to exactly the right people, timed precisely to create maximum pressure on Cross at the worst possible moment for his organization. When the deadline Cross gave me finally arrives, I am not hiding, and I am not running. I am standing beside Elena in her office, watching real-time reports come in from contacts across the city, confirming that the information has reached its targets, that whispers are already spreading through networks Cross once controlled completely, that men who followed him out of fear are beginning to question whether his position is as secure as he claimed. My phone rings again exactly at the deadline, and this time when I answer, Cross's voice carries none of the calm confidence from our previous conversation. "What have you done?" he demands, his composure finally cracking under pressure. I have not heard from him since the night he first moved against my family. "I have done exactly what you taught me," I answer steadily. "I found your weaknesses, and I used them before you could use mine." The silence on the line stretches long enough that I almost think he has hung up, and when he finally speaks again, his voice carries a fury barely held in check. "This is not over," he says. "It already is," I tell him, and this time, I am the one who ends the call. Over the following days, the consequences of our carefully orchestrated exposure ripple through Cross's organization exactly as we hoped. Rival groups move quickly to claim territories he can no longer defend, while managing the scandal threatening to expose his illegal financial activities to authorities who have been waiting years for exactly this kind of opportunity. Within a week, sources tell me Cross has disappeared entirely, either fled the city or forced into hiding by enemies who finally saw the opening they needed to move against him. I do not know if I will ever face him directly again, whether this chapter of my life is truly finished or simply paused until he resurfaces somewhere else with a new plan. But for the first time since the night my apartment burned and my old life ended in fire and betrayal, I feel something close to genuine safety, standing in an office 40 floors above a city that no longer feels like a trap closing around me. Elena finds me on the rooftop terrace one evening, several weeks after everything with Cross finally settled into a fragile kind of peace, the city spread out beneath us in a blanket of lights that used to represent nothing but danger, and now simply looks beautiful. "You could stay," she says quietly, standing beside me at the railing. "Not as a janitor. I could use someone with your particular skills in a legitimate capacity. Someone who understands threats most people in my position never see coming until it is too late." I consider her offer carefully, weighing everything it would mean to finally step fully out of the shadows I have been hiding inside for months. I am not the same man I was before Cross destroyed everything. I tell her honestly. I do not know if I even want to return to that world, the constant danger, the violence, the endless cycle of enemies waiting to take what you have built. Then do not, she says simply. Build something different instead. With me, if you want to. I turn to look at her fully, studying the same face I first saw standing alone at this window months ago, carrying weight she refused to let anyone see. Except now there is no weight left unshared between us, no secrets hiding beneath careful disguises, only the honest understanding of two people who found each other by accident and chose, against every reasonable instinct, to trust each other completely. I do not know what comes next, I admit, and I do not need to. Neither do I, she says, a small smile finally breaking through the careful composure she wears for the rest of the world. But I would rather face it with you than face it alone. I reach for her hand, and this time there is nothing formal or hesitant about the gesture, only the simple certainty of two people who survived something dangerous together and found, somewhere in the middle of all that danger, something worth protecting far more than either of us expected when this all began. The city stretches out below us, quiet and glowing in the evening light, no longer a place to hide from, but a place to finally, truly belong. Whatever name I choose to carry forward from this point, whatever life Elena and I decide to build together in the aftermath of everything Cross tried to destroy, I know now that surviving was never actually the goal. Finding someone worth the fight always was. In the weeks that follow, Voss Industries emerges from the crisis stronger rather than weaker. The quiet regulatory action against the shell companies drawing quiet praise from the board for Elena's diligence rather than any hint of scandal. Grace makes good on her joking offer, and I find myself spending afternoons in the legal department reviewing contracts and supply agreements with an eye trained by years of exactly the kind of negotiations most executives never see up close, catching risks that experienced lawyers had missed simply because they had never needed to think like the men on the other side of a dangerous deal. Carl notices my absence from the cleaning schedule within days, and when Elena finally tells him the truth, sanitized carefully enough to protect both of us, that the quiet new janitor turned out to have a background in corporate security and risk assessment, he simply shrugs and says he always knew there was something different about the way I worked a room. I do not correct him. Some truths are better left resting exactly where people are comfortable leaving them. My old associates check in periodically, cautious reports filtering through channels we built specifically to avoid drawing attention, confirming that Cross remains scattered and weakened. His old territories divided among rivals who show no particular interest in continuing his war against a man they now consider irrelevant. I do not know if that peace will last forever. Men like Cross rarely disappear completely, and some quiet, watchful part of me will likely never fully relax again. But for the first time in longer than I can remember, the danger feels distant instead of immediate, a shadow at the edge of a life that finally has room for something more than survival. Elena and I do not rush anything in the months that follow. We build slowly, carefully, the way two people who have both been burned badly by trusting the wrong people tend to build things when they finally find someone worth trusting completely. Dinners, after long days at the office. Quiet mornings on the same rooftop terrace where everything between us finally became honest. Conversations that stretch late into the night, not about danger or survival, but about the ordinary things two people share when they are simply learning each other. Favorite books, childhood memories, small dreams neither of us ever expected to have room for again. Sometimes, standing beside her at that rooftop railing with the whole city spread out beneath us, I think about the man I used to be, the one who walked into Voss Tower wearing a stranger's name and carrying nothing but fear and desperation. That man could never have imagined finding something like this, a partner instead of a subordinate, honesty instead of calculated distance, a life built on trust rather than power. Cross took everything I thought defined me, my name, my organization, my sense of control over my own future. What he could not take, in the end, was the chance to become someone entirely new, standing beside someone who saw exactly who I was and chose to stay anyway. That, I have come to understand, is worth infinitely more than anything I lost.